Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believe in a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
That's right. When you don't know what to do, just keep on breathing. From the City of Angels in Los Angeles, welcome to all my listeners out there in Radio Land. I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver at caregiverdave.com, along with my lovely co-host, former mayor of California Beach Town and best-selling author, Debbie Peterson. We're also coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on numerous syndicated radio and podcast networks on 30 audio and video platforms, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Spreaker, SoundCloud, many, many more. In fact, we're proud to be voted #1 caregiver podcast on FeedSpot out of thousands and #1 caregiver podcast of the top 50 on Player FM. And we have an especially exciting show planned. Andrea Waltz is a sales trainer, speaker, and co-author of the best-selling book, Go for No, known for her unique approach to transforming rejection into success. Audiences how to embrace no as a stepping stone to growth, empowering them to break free from perfectionism and fear. With her engaging style, Andrea guides caregivers and professionals alike to ask what they need and find resilience, in every response. But before we continue, I want to take this moment to thank my last week's guests, Rebecca LaChance, Karen Smith, Ray Cott, and Karen Justice. The three widows have authored a new book titled Widows Among Us, Incorporates. And you can watch or listen to that interview along with all our other interviews on our membership website, caregiverdave.com, or any of our other 30 global audio and video platforms that I mentioned before. Okay, enough of that. Andrea, welcome to the Caregiver Dave Show. So glad to have you on.
I am so glad to be here, Dave.
Oh, good. I like to always ask my guests just who is Andrea Waltz and why was she placed on this earth?
Oh my goodness, what a great question. Well, I am, as you said in your introduction, I'm a speaker, I'm an author, that's what I do. Why was I placed on this earth? Well, I certainly didn't know I was going to be placed on this earth to help people overcome their fear of failure and rejection, but that has been my mission now for the last 20 plus years. So that's a big part of it. I am a huge animal lover. I live in based in Orlando, Florida. And I love personal growth, personal development. And my passion is sharing this message with as many people as possible.
Yay. That's a great answer. Let's ask you now, what are some common fears around rejection that caregivers face and how can they start to overcome them? I love the way you say you're all about no, and I always say caregivers don't have enough boundaries in their life. They need to stand in front of the mirror and practice saying no 100 different ways, like my wife does. She has aphasia, and she can say no at least 100 different ways. Go ahead.
I love that you brought that up because, of course, as a caregiver, you're going to hear no a lot from the person that you are caring for. Yeah. And there's all kinds of rejection. And it's also, of course, a very important skill and a whole other topic were we to talk about the importance of saying no, right? Saying no to other people, saying no to things that aren't for you, all of that. And when I met with you, Dave and Debbie, and we kind of talked through this for the show, I remember thinking, is fear of rejection, because I come at it from a business standpoint most of the time, from a sales standpoint, is that even appropriate for this audience? And I feel like it really is because of this. I want to just flip it around a little bit and say that while this audience may not necessarily have to face a ton of rejection, even though they get no's from the people they're caring for, what they do need to get really good at is asking. And whenever you are going to increase the asks that you are making, and those asks could be of anybody, it could be of other caregivers, it could be of the entities and institutions and companies and insurance, and all of that we have to deal with as caregivers. It could be just asking for the person you're caring for. So it really comes down to, I think, why your mindset around rejection is so important for a caregiver is because the whole go for no philosophy is about being willing to hear no more often in your pursuit of yes. And that means that you need to ask more. And I think that it is a knee-jerk reaction, and I see this in the business world all the time, that when you are a compassionate, empathetic person, you tend to say no to yourself rather than let somebody else say no to you. So you shut yourself down first, which, of course, is a huge issue. And so instead of being willing to hear no and trying to get the things that you want, trying to get those yeses, you limit your opportunities. And then we know a host of other things can spiral from that.
Yeah. And no, don't take it personal. I mean, my wife, sometimes we have a great relationship and we get along with each other. We love each other. But just last night, she takes these sleeping pills and gets a little groggy and sloppy and in her wheelchair. And she's trying to, do it the wrong way because she doesn't see what I can see. And sometimes, she can be a little rebellious. She's a strong-willed woman, and she'll argue with me, and I've got to be forceful and say, "Listen, you can't see what I see. Do it this way." And she'll say no, and I'll say, "Too bad. We're doing it this way." A little tough love. Otherwise, she could fall again and spend another 6 weeks in a nursing home or something. But you got to be strong. You got to be able to say no. Don't take it personal. Empathy and sympathy is great, but not if you do it all the time. Anything that you got to add to that, Debbie?
Oh my goodness, I'm so busy listening. I agree. Yeah. I guess the whole thing of saying no is fascinating in all the different areas. And I never heard anybody say that's the kind of thing that people who are empathetic tend to say no to themselves first instead of asking. I love that concept. What about perfectionism? So how do we tend to have everything to be perfect. And of course, life doesn't usually work that way. What can we do to let go of the need to be perfect or need to always get things just right?
Right. So what does perfection have to do? And this is kind of the first question, like, what does perfection have to do with fear of rejection, right? Because and wanting to hear no more often. Well, the thing of it is for people who are perfectionists, and there's personality type that I find with people who maybe have a fear of having somebody reject them, maybe have a fear of being told no, is the reason that they have that fear is that they don't like to fail. They don't like to, they see that if they get rejected, if they hear a no, that is somehow a failure and that they have somehow failed. So the antidote to that perfectionistic tendency is to really embrace failure and to be willing to embrace the messes. Even in your situation, Dave, I think sometimes when you're dealing with somebody they're feisty, they don't see what you can see, and you have to kind of assert yourself, and there's like that battle. I think there's that desire to have everything go well and smooth and easy, and that if we mess that up, that we're somehow failing as a caregiver, and nothing could be further from the truth. So in our book Go for No, we actually have this model, and it's a mental model that you can apply to anything. And really what it is we've all been taught and trained that failure, rejection, hearing the word no is on one side, success and yes is on the other, and they're opposites. Like we have to choose one or the other. We either are successful or we fail. And actually, the real model that we all need to be operating with is where we're on one side. The failure, the rejection is really in the middle, and the success and the yeses that we're seeking are on the other side. We've got to learn to be willing to move through that failure. And when we are, that's how we dismantle those perfectionistic tendencies. Because when you do the perfectionism thing, that's when all of the stress builds up, because it's that difference between your expectations, right? Your expectations of how you should be and how things should be are way up here. And then there's reality. And that gap is where unhappiness lies.
Yeah.
And oftentimes that is caused by that perfectionism. So a big part of the mindset we teach is embrace the failure. It's okay that it's not perfect. Sometimes it's not going to work out the way you envision. That's just part of the path onto success, however that success, quote unquote, looks for you.
Yeah. And no is an opportunity. Well, maybe that's not the answer you want, but it's hey, how can I turn this no into a yes, or into a maybe, or into okay, I'll do half of it, or whatever. It is an opportunity. Debbie, you got any next question?
What do you think makes it so hard for caregivers to ask for help? Is there one thing they can do to kind of get themselves to find that easier thing to do?
Well, I have a mantra, and I use this when I find myself, stressed out and in caregiving mode, and that is, you don't have to be general manager of the universe. So gotta remember that you don't have to control everything. And again, a big part of that is just embracing the mess, embracing that failure on the way to success. But I think that the other thing is to not feel like you have to do it on your own. And I think people struggle with asking for help because they don't know how. Oftentimes, they don't want to feel like a burden. Maybe they fear hearing that no, and so they won't ask. But it's really important to remember that when you do ask, there are some guardrails. There's some things that you can put in place so that when you do ask for help, it won't feel to you as the caregiver like, I'm being a burden on somebody else and I don't want to do that. And so one of the ways that you can do that is frame the ask. So explain to somebody why you're asking now, why it's so important, how it will help you. And then, and this is really important, give the other person a chance to help you. Oftentimes, again, we say no to ourselves instead of being willing to accept the no from somebody else. Now, oftentimes it's going to be a yes, right? So give people the opportunity to help you. There's kind of a saying when it comes to asking for anything, especially even in sales, and that is, what's in it for me? And I think oftentimes caregivers think, well, why would this person want to help me? Why would they want to pick up my loved one and take them to the doctor, or take them here, take them there? That's just a burden on them. Well, not necessarily. Think about what's in it for that person. And maybe it's just that that person wants to help you and they want to give back, but you've decided that you're not going to give them that opportunity. So remember, though, what's in it for them oftentimes is that people want to be involved and they want to help. And I'll just add that one of the Achilles heels for caregivers, especially when it comes to asking, is making assumptions. And that is, they decide what somebody else wants to do. They decide what somebody else is going to say. And so again, rather than asking and just being willing to communicate, they think, well, they're just going to say no, or I'm just going to put them in an awkward situation, or I don't want to burden them. They'll say yes only because of out of obligation. And that's you just making up stories and coming up with assumptions. So you've got to stop that and go back to the go for no mindset, which is, I'm going to ask. I'm going to do it in a nice, respectful, fun, polite way. I'm going to share what's in it for them. I'm going to frame it as to how it's going to help me and help my loved one. And then I'm going to ask the question and let the result be what it's going to be.
So let's do it. Give me some experience and some examples of how a caregiver can creatively say no.
Oh, now you're talking about saying no.
As
So
opposed,
different,
as
right?
opposed to hearing no.
As opposed to hearing no, right? Different
I think
skill, right?
we covered hearing no. Now we want to where we have
Now,
to say no.
yeah, right. Well, there's a kind of a funny saying that when it comes to saying no, which is no is a full sentence. And
Well, what part of no don't you understand?
right, what part of no don't you understand? I think that most people, though, if they're being honest, again, this always comes back to the skill of communication and practice. So saying no is a skill and a practice. And what I think really the important thing is to remember that you don't have to offer a long explanation. You don't have to make a ton of excuses. But most people, if we're being honest, want something. They want something to be able to hang it on. And I think honesty is the absolute best part. And even if, like, if you're feeling awkward or weird about how you have to say no, then call that out and just say, listen, I know that this shouldn't be like such a difficult thing for me, but I'm having a really hard time with this. So I'm going to be honest and just tell you I have to say no to this right now. And when you call out what emotion you are feeling and you're just willing to be honest and vulnerable in that moment, people understand. They get it. And so it really is about having the courage to communicate. And courage is such a big part of communication because it's just you being willing to kind of put yourself out there and show people what's really going on.
And it's more than communication too. It is communication, but it's also negotiation. Because we're negotiating every day, every minute with our kids, with the salesman on the phone who won't hang up, and etc. So how do we negotiate to let the other person receive our no, or we can go back, we're hearing no, how do we negotiate and turn that no into a yes?
Yeah, so turning no into a yes is a skill. Again, more skill. And again, it comes back to that whole idea of what's in it for the other person. And too often, right. And that's the basis for all good negotiations, right? Is to frame it in such a way that it's not just about you and it's not just about them, but what's in it for them, and give people context. That's really the most important thing when it comes to negotiating anything is, and I think sometimes we forget to give context. So what do I mean by that? Well, it's in whatever it is that you're negotiating, explain the why behind it. So if you want to, let's say, go to a particular place for lunch, and you just say, I want to go to this place, and the other person says, well, no, I don't want to go to that place. Well, you might have some other reasons as to why you want to go there. Maybe it's next door to another place that you need to stop. Maybe you have a coupon to that place and you've got a free lunch. You need to be able to
want to spy on our daughter who has a date next door to that place.
See, you never know. There's all kinds of reasons why. But if you don't share those reasons, if you don't give the context, then it makes people far more likely to tell you no. Yeah. And now, of course, you're having to clean up the communication. And sometimes what happens is people kind of get entrenched and dig in and they don't fully communicate. And so it's like there's missing information here. So give context, give the why behind your reasoning and your ask, and that will really help you move forward in your negotiations.
Debbie.
Okay, so suppose you're still in the practicing phase. You're not real good at it yet, but you keep trying, and you end up feeling emotional. You have a slump, you have a setback, you're depressed about it. It overly upsets you. You're not sleeping, or whatever happens with those things. How do you change that? Is there a way how do you handle that? What can you do to help yourself?
So Debbie, I'm sure that you guys have heard this advice more than once, and you probably give this to each other and to other people often. And that is, and this is a common thing that we talk about from a sales standpoint, but this really is for anybody. And that is, when you feel like you're stuck, when you feel like you're in a slump, when you're kind of at the end of your rope, so to speak, and in my line of work, because I teach business audiences how to get rejected more. People get depressed and get deflated a lot, right? They get down. And that is the world of caregiving, I think. You can only take so much till you just are frustrated. There's so many emotions. Changing your state is the biggest way that you can deal with those emotions. So what does that mean? It means physically get up and move. Get outside for a second, put your feet on a different type of ground. Listen to a song that changes your state. Watch something funny, listen to comedy, watch a funny sitcom. All of these things really change your kind of your mentality. They get your mind out of what is going on right then. And that change of state, physical and mental, can go a long way to pulling you out of that, just even for a few minutes. It's so important to do that, to kind of interrupt the pattern. Think about kind of the analogy is if you're playing a record and it's like the record's going around and round, and that's you just at your emotional low. You got to scratch the record. You got to do something different. Now, you probably don't want to splash cold water on your face. That's one way to change your state. So do something pleasant for yourself. And that's really what I mean by that.
Wow. Good stuff here. How does embracing persistence change the experience of caregiving, especially when facing constant challenges? Is that what you just talked about right now?
So persistence is a whole other topic, Dave. Persistence is it's a huge part of having a go for no mindset.
One of the most successful negotiating tactics, I know you know this, is just ignore the objection. You say no, and you just, I didn't hear that, and it worked. I mean, our kids do it. I want ice cream. No, you can't have it. I want ice cream. No, you can't have it. It's bedtime. It's lunchtime.
That's right.
They don't give up. And you eventually give in just to shut them up.
Exactly. And now I can see that. And listen, I mean, we don't advocate, obviously, making people crazy. But persistence, I think, it's a underrated trait, especially in the world of caregiving. And the reason I say that is because you're always negotiating. You're negotiating with the person as you said so perfectly, Dave, you're negotiating with the person you're taking care of. You're negotiating oftentimes with all kinds of different entities. I mean, I have found myself negotiating. I mean, talk about negotiating with doctors' offices. Oh my gosh. Trying to change appointments, trying to make appointments, trying to get this doctor before this doctor so that you can see the third doctor. You're in constant negotiation, and that requires persistence. And it's a huge trait. My mindset is, you know what? I'm going to call early. I'm going to call often, and I'm going to ask. And so from a caregiving perspective, you can't shy away and just hope. Hope is not a strategy. You can't shy away and just say, well, they said they would call, and so I'm going to wait all day. And then, you don't get the phone call that you need. And now you don't get the result. No, you've got to stay on top of it. And if that means calling 3 or 4 or 5 times to some entity that you're dealing with in a day, you've got to do it. Get persistent. Ask. That is at the heart of Go for No.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to caregivers on handling emotional slumps, setbacks? Is that another word for burnout or depression?
Yeah, it is. And this really goes back to the whole change your state thing. I mean, that is my number one piece of advice is in those moments where you find yourself depressed, deflated, having a setback, to change things up right then and there. Do what you can to change things up. And then I'm sure you guys have heard this too. You can't you can't have be in one emotion like anger, for example, or depressed, and layer the emotion of gratitude on there at the same time. You can't be grateful and also feel those feelings at the same time. It's impossible. And so one of my strategies too is, in your head, just make a mental 10 check gratitude list as you are feeling at your lowest, and just run through. And it could be as simple as there's running water, there's food, I'm warm, safe, and dry, we've got a car, everyone is relatively healthy and stable. The list goes on and on. And so when you make that gratitude list, it reduces the severity of the emotion you're going through. And this isn't to say there's like this toxic positivity where it's like there's no room for being sad, and there's no room for. No, I don't believe that. I think there are times where you've got to let it out. You've got to let those negative emotions play out. But then once they're played out, you've got to stay positive, right? And gratitude, I think, is one of the best ways to do that.
So we're almost out of time. Is there a question that you would like me to ask that I did not ask yet?
Yeah, that's a hard one. Debbie, help me out. What's another good question?
Oh boy, now I'm stuck. Well, what I do always want to know is, so how do we find out more? If we need help with this, where do we go to find out more? Can you help? Do you have a book, a site?
We do.
And if you are going to talk about your book, tell us why you wrote it and what you hope people will get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So this book is a short 80-page fable. I highly recommend, if people can't sit down to read, but they are able to listen. It's also available as an audiobook. It's on Spotify. It's on Amazon Audible. And it's about a guy who wakes up one morning in a house that belongs to a wildly successful future version of him. And this is a 10 years in the future version of him. And he's trying to figure out, both of them, this other him and the current him, how did this other me get so successful? Like, what did this guy do? And they figure out that the secret is go for no. So it's a fun, interesting fable about your future self. And if you could meet your future self, what would you want to know? What would your future self maybe teach you? So it's kind of a cool concept. I would also encourage people, so that you can Google and find that easily. Just Google Go for No.
I'm going to listen to it.
And the other thing I would encourage people to do is come to goforno.com. We've got a fun assessment. It's called the No Quotient Quiz. So you can test to see what your no quotient is. That's your feelings and your behaviors around failure, rejection, hearing the word no. What's your mindset? Some people have a high no quotient. Some people have a moderate no quotient. Some people have a low no quotient. And I give strategies on how to work on all of them depending on where you fall. So it's kind of like, it's not exactly an IQ test or an EQ test, but this is your NQ test.
I'm going to do it sounds like fun. I can't wait. I always like to see how I'm doing. Somebody who doesn't know me.
Right.
Well, I think that about wraps it up. I appreciate you coming on the show. Again, how do we get a hold of you one more time?
Just Google Go for No, and we're out there all over the place. Grab the book, grab the audio book, come take the quiz, and just the last piece of advice I'll say is, if you're ever hesitating, if you ever think like, I'm not sure if I should ask, don't hesitate. Go for no. Make your ask. The worst that they can say is no to you.
We know how to handle that. I can't believe how fast our time has gone today. What a great show. Thanks so much for coming on. And how can, we already know how your listeners can reach you. And Debbie, how can people reach you?
Well, I love this subject, and it's if in doubt, ask is brilliant. I help people understand how they can work with their local government to make sure that it's serving the needs of the community. And one of the more, I suppose, it's entertaining parts of that is my podcast, Corruption Chronicles. And if you just Google Debbie Peterson and Corruption Chronicles, you'll come across lots of interesting podcasts.
And my number one best-selling book, It's Your Life Too, How to Thrive as a Caregiver, available wherever books are sold and also on my free membership website, caregiverdave.com, where you can also schedule a free 30-minute initial coaching call, talk about whatever you're struggling with. And I also invite you to join my Caregiver Dave Facebook community of 34,000 caregivers, lots of tools, resources, videos, this radio show, and much, much more. And hey, if you click the like or follow button on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this interview on, it helps us reach even more caregivers by improving Google search engine algorithms. So thank you again to all my listeners out there all over the world for tuning in every Wednesday, making us the number one caregiver podcast and radio show on the internet. So until next week, same time, same channel, may God richly bless you all. Bye-bye.
One Arm, One Leg, 100 Words, Overcoming Unbelievable Hardships is about Charlene, a stroke survivor. Back in 1996, Charlene was a healthy, normal, very active 52-year-old woman whose amazing talents resemble that of both a Martha Stewart and a Wonder Woman. But all that changed when she suffered a massive stroke that left her severely speech impaired and paralyzed on the right side. Who am I? My name is David. I've had the privilege of being Charlene's husband since 1975. We had a wonderful fairy tale storybook-like courtship that culminated in our marriage a year later. Charlene had just come out of a marriage where after 10 years, she received 2 black eyes and a broken nose by her former husband when he came home high on speed. Charlene believed in no second chances of any kind for abuse, so she left. Finding herself all alone in the world with her 5 and 10-year-old daughters Cynthia Lorraine and Deborah Lynn, she started raising them by herself for the next 2 years. Then fate brought us all together. After falling in love with Charlene, Cindy, and Debbie, our love then produced Rebecca Elizabeth. We had a wonderful, normal life for the next 20 years. But today, things are very different for everyone. How about the reaction of 9-time Grammy and Dove Award recipient, the godfather of contemporary gospel Christian music, Andre Crouch? Charlene just won't let the promises of God go, and she has not let her circumstances get in the way of her faith. She's not just a survivor, she's more than a conqueror, as the Bible states. You'll be encouraged by her testimony, regardless of what you're going through. Available everywhere.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing.